Emily Hart had always believed she was living the kind of life people only dreamed about. Graceful, composed, and deeply hard-working, she had built her own quiet success while standing beside Adrian Cole, her charismatic millionaire husband whose charm could light up any room he entered. Together they moved through life like a power couple pulled straight out of a magazine spread, attending high society events, charity galas, and exclusive business dinners where everyone admired their elegance and envied the harmony they seemed to radiate. Their mansion, perched on a hill overlooking the city, was a symbol of everything they had achieved: polished marble floors, tall windows that caught every sunrise, and rooms filled with memories Emily believed were built on trust and love. Friends often told her she was lucky, blessed, even adored, and Emily smiled because she truly thought so too. But beneath the shine, there were small cracks she chose not to stare at too closely. Adrian's late-night business meetings, which used to be occasional, had slowly become routine. His sudden mood swings, irritation over tiny things, absent-minded responses during conversations, felt new and unsettling. Emily tried to blame stress, pressure, or exhaustion from running a multimillion-dollar empire. And then there was Vanessa, Emily's best friend since college, who had recently become strangely invested in Adrian's work. She asked oddly specific questions, complimented him a little too eagerly, and appeared at their home far more frequently than before. Emily noticed it, felt a pinch of discomfort, but convinced herself she was overthinking. She trusted Vanessa like a sister. She trusted Adrian because he was her husband. And trust, she believed, was the foundation of their perfect life. So she smiled, silenced her instincts, and continued living inside the glittering illusion she thought was unbreakable, never imagining how quickly everything could shatter. Adrian announced the business trip casually over breakfast, as if it were something he had mentioned 100 times before. He said he would be gone for 2 days, back-to-back meetings, late-night negotiations, the usual demands of his high-powered world. Emily nodded, forcing a smile, even though a familiar heaviness tugged at her chest. She hated how often he was away now, how distant he felt even when sitting right beside her. Still, she tried to understand, tried to remind herself that his success came with sacrifices. He kissed her forehead quickly, barely lingering, and she told herself not to read into it. Later that afternoon, Vanessa called, her voice unusually sweet and cheerful as she suggested they go for a spa day, just the two of us. Emily sensed something off in her tone, a kind of eagerness that didn't quite match their usual dynamic. But she brushed it aside and declined, saying she felt tired and wanted to rest. Vanessa pretended to be disappointed, laughing softly as if she understood, but something in her voice lingered in Emily's mind long after the call ended. That evening, Emily walked through the quiet house, feeling its emptiness more intensely than ever. She made herself tea, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and sank into the couch, letting the silence settle around her. She missed Adrian, missed the version of him who used to sit with her, laugh with her, talk about their dreams. She hoped this trip would give them the space to breathe, maybe reset, maybe bring him back to her in the way she longed for. He had been so quick to leave this morning, almost relieved to be heading out the door, but Emily convinced herself it was just stress. She had no idea that within hours, fate would push her back home earlier than expected, and straight into the moment that would change everything. Emily was curled on the couch, half asleep, when her phone buzzed with an unexpected call from her office. Her supervisor apologized for the late hour, explaining that a major meeting had been rescheduled and they needed her in early the next morning. It was sudden, inconvenient, but unavoidable. Emily assured them she would be there, ending the call with a sigh. With Adrian away on his business trip, she figured getting some rest at home would help her prepare for the long day ahead. She grabbed her bag and sent Adrian a quick message to let him know she'd left her sister's place early and was heading home. The message delivered, but no reply came. When she tried calling, his phone went straight to voicemail. Emily frowned for a moment, but then reminded herself he was probably in the middle of meetings, maybe even asleep. Still, something about his silence tugged at her. He usually texted back quickly, even during work trips. As she drove through the quiet city streets, her thoughts drifted to him. She imagined surprising him with a warm dinner when he returned, maybe having a real conversation about the tension growing between them. Maybe this time he would listen. Maybe this time he would see how lonely she'd been feeling. But as she replayed their recent interactions, small inconsistencies suddenly appeared sharper: the rushed kiss, the relieved expression when he left, the way Vanessa had insisted on seeing her today. Emily shook her head, trying to dismiss the unease building in her chest. The night grew quieter as she approached the mansion, the long driveway lit by soft garden lights. Everything looked peaceful, still, unchanged. Yet an odd chill crawled up her spine, a whisper of warning her mind refused to interpret. She parked the car slowly, unaware that within moments her entire world would shift. Emily parked and stepped out carefully, noting the porch light painting long shadows across the stone. The front door was ajar, a small gap that should not have been there. Her key turned with a quiet click and the door swung inward on a faint draft. Inside, lamps glowed in the hallway and a soft light bled from upstairs. Curiosity pushed at her chest, but she told herself calm things. Maybe Adrian had returned early, maybe staff had left the light on. A wine glass rested on the console, its stem catching the glow. The scent of perfume hung in the air, a floral note that tightened something behind her ribs. She moved forward so slowly her shoes made no sound, each step measured as if hesitation might keep the world intact. Faint music floated from the master suite, the old song Adrian had once dragged her across the floor to, and beneath it a laugh too intimate for strangers. Her palms went cool and her fingertips brushed the banister, gripping harder than she realized. Images flickered: Adrian's laugh, Vanessa's impulsive hugs, secrets traded over coffee. She scolded herself for paranoia, yet the hair along her arms prickled. She climbed the final steps, heart thudding a wary rhythm, and slowed at the top landing. The hallway felt smaller, the pictures on the walls suddenly accusing. A second wine glass lay half hidden by a throw, and a faint smudge on the banister looked like lipstick. Outside the bedroom door she hesitated, breath shallow, as muffled voices stitched sentences she could not yet make sense of. For a beat she closed her eyes and steadied herself, then moved forward, each step toward that door stretching the moment taut until it snapped. She told herself she knew the house, but unease clung to her. Emily's hand trembled as she pushed the bedroom door open, and the world seemed to tilt violently on its axis. There, in the place that had once been the sanctuary of her love, lay Adrian, tangled in sheets with Vanessa, her best friend since childhood. Clothes were strewn across the floor as if a storm had passed through, and the air was thick with the unmistakable scent of perfume and betrayal. Adrian's eyes widened in shock, guilt flashing across his features for only a moment before confusion and fear replaced it. Vanessa, however, only smirked faintly, her face twisting into a mock expression of remorse, a cruel mask that made Emily's chest tighten with both anger and disbelief. Time slowed, and Emily stood frozen, the floor beneath her feeling unreal. Her mind raced, the late nights, the excuses, the whispered phone calls that she had ignored. How could they? Her husband, the man she had trusted with every part of her life, and her dearest friend, the one she had shared secrets, laughter, and tears with, both betraying her in the same heartbeat. A fiery mix of heartbreak and rage surged through her, her vision sharpening on their faces, their actions, their audacity. Words formed, but she could not speak, the betrayal had stolen her voice. Vanessa tried to speak first, her tone sickeningly casual: "Emily, but Emily's gaze cut through her like ice. Adrian stammered, attempting to justify, muttering about mistakes, about stress, about loneliness, as if these were reasons enough to shatter her life. But Emily could hear nothing, feel nothing for them now except the bitter sting of betrayal. She turned sharply, each step away from the room heavy but deliberate. Her world had collapsed in seconds, the life she thought perfect crumbling around her, leaving only a hollow ache and a fierce, blinding clarity. She would not stay, she would not forgive. Adrian caught up to Emily as she turned toward the staircase, his voice urgent and panicked. "Emily, wait. Please, let's just talk," he pleaded, his eyes wide with desperation. "It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I never meant for this to happen." His hands reached toward her, but she stepped back, the anger and betrayal still raw, the shock still vivid in her chest. Vanessa fidgeted beside him, her posture uneasy, lips pressed tight. "Emily," she began nervously, "he misled me." "I didn't know," her words faltered under Emily's cold, piercing gaze. Emily finally spoke, her voice low but steady, cutting through the tension like a knife. She recounted everything she had noticed over the past months: Adrian's late-night absences, the cancelled dinners, the suspicious business trips that never seemed to end, and Vanessa's sudden obsession with his work. She described how her instincts had tried to warn her, how small inconsistencies had piled into a mountain of doubt. Adrian tried to interrupt, stammering about stress, loneliness, and the pressures of maintaining a high-powered marriage, as though those were excuses for betrayal. Vanessa, quick to manipulate, shifted blame to Emily, accusing her of neglecting Adrian, of failing to notice him, of not being present in their marriage. Emily's expression hardened, her patience gone. She refused to tolerate their excuses, their lies, or their attempts to twist reality. She spoke with clarity and authority, stating for the first time that she was done. Every plea, every manipulation, fell flat before the steel of her resolve. Adrian's face paled, the panic in his eyes intensifying as Emily calmly mentioned divorce for the first time, the words slicing through the room and into both their hearts. For the first time, Emily was no longer a passive observer of her life. She was taking control, refusing to be a victim, refusing to forgive, refusing to stay in a world built on lies. Emily stepped out of the mansion into the cool night air, the weight of what she had seen pressing down on her chest like a physical force. Her heels clicked against the marble driveway, each step echoing in the silent night, a stark reminder of how empty the house felt without trust or love. She got into her car without looking back, hands trembling on the steering wheel, and started driving aimlessly through the city. Streetlights blurred as tears streamed down her face, and her mind replayed every memory: Vanessa's laugh, Adrian's smile, the intimate moments she had cherished, now tainted by betrayal. She felt a surge of foolishness and anger at herself for trusting them, for believing in their love, for letting herself be vulnerable. The streets were empty, but her thoughts were crowded with a whirlwind of emotions: rage, grief, heartbreak, and disbelief. She replayed the conversations she had had with both of them, their lies and manipulations echoing in her mind. How could two people she trusted most conspire to betray her so completely? Every memory she had treasured suddenly felt like a cruel joke, and the realization hit her: the life she thought she knew had vanished in a single moment. Eventually, her car slowed in front of her sister's apartment building. Emily stepped inside, feeling weak and hollow. She collapsed into her sister's arms, sobbing uncontrollably as she told her everything, each word a mix of grief and fury. Her sister held her tightly, whispering words of comfort and truth. She deserved better, Adrian was unworthy of her forgiveness, and she had the strength to walk away. Through the tears and trembling, Emily felt a spark of resolve. Even in the midst of devastation, she sensed the first flicker of strength, a realization that she could survive this, that she could reclaim herself despite the pain, and that she would never allow herself to be broken by betrayal again. The next morning, Emily awoke to a barrage of notifications that made her phone buzz incessantly in her lap. Call after call, message after message, and voicemails piled up from Adrian, each one more desperate than the last. He apologized, pleaded, and begged her to answer, his voice dripping with false sincerity. She scrolled through his messages, seeing flowers sent to her apartment, long, emotional notes about regret, promises of change, and pleas for forgiveness. Every attempt to reach her, however, was met with silence. She didn't respond. She didn't look back. She simply let the messages pile up, a testament to her resolve. Vanessa, too, had begun her frantic attempts. Her calls were sharp, anxious, and filled with fear. "Emily, please, you don't understand, we can fix this, don't ruin our friendship," she begged over the phone, her voice trembling. Emily ignored her, the betrayal still fresh and raw. The audacity of both of them stunned her even further. As she avoided their voices, the outside world began to intrude. News outlets had caught wind of Adrian's business trip scandal, headlines spilling across social media and entertainment pages. The story of a millionaire caught cheating with his wife's best friend was spreading like wildfire, the media painting him as both foolish and unrepentant. The pressure intensified when Adrian's board of directors began calling, worried about the company's reputation and urging him to resolve his marital crisis before it affected business. Adrian, now cornered and increasingly frantic, drove around the city searching for Emily, hoping to convince her to meet him in person. He tried multiple approaches, each more desperate than the last, but Emily remained unreachable, her mind focused not on him or his excuses, but on the life she needed to reclaim. Adrian's calm, confident demeanor had vanished completely, replaced with panic, guilt, and a growing realization that he might have finally lost the only woman who had truly mattered. Emily agreed to meet Adrian one final time, not out of hope or forgiveness, but out of a need to hear the truth, to confront the man who had shattered her world. They sat across from each other in a quiet, neutral cafe, the hum of the city outside a stark contrast to the tension that filled the small space between them. Emily's eyes, steady and unwavering, bore into his as she asked the questions that had haunted her since the night she discovered the betrayal. Adrian shifted in his chair, uncomfortable under her gaze, and after a long pause, he admitted it: his affair with Vanessa had begun months ago. The words fell heavily, like stones in her chest, but Emily refused to flinch or break down. Disgust washed over her, but she held firm, channeling every ounce of strength she could muster. She spoke calmly, her voice sharp and precise. Betrayal wasn't a mistake, it wasn't a lapse in judgment, it was a choice, a conscious decision he had made to betray the woman who had trusted him completely. Adrian's face fell, guilt mingling with desperation. He pleaded, offering therapy, promising to change, begging for a second chance, anything that might keep her from leaving. But Emily was resolute. She had already felt the pain, the anger, the heartbreak. She had already seen the consequences of his actions. No promises could undo what had been done, and she refused to allow him to manipulate her emotions further. Rising from the chair with calm dignity, Emily straightened her posture and looked at Adrian one last time. She no longer feared losing him, he had been lost to her long ago. Now, she was free to let go, to reclaim her life and her self-respect. She walked away, each step a deliberate act of liberation, leaving behind the man who had once held her heart but had squandered the trust she had given him so completely. The moment Emily returned home from her meeting with Adrian, she made a decision that left no room for negotiation: she would file for divorce immediately. There was no hesitation, no second thought. She had endured enough betrayal, enough lies, and now it was time to reclaim control over her life. Adrian, expecting that she might eventually come around or be swayed by his pleas, was stunned when he received the formal papers. His shock was evident, his usual confidence stripped away, leaving only panic and disbelief. Emily's legal team moved swiftly and with precision. Every document, every clause, and every demand was carefully crafted to protect her interests. Vanessa, desperate and exposed, tried to manipulate public opinion by posting emotional narratives online, painting herself as a victim caught in a complicated love triangle. But the strategy backfired spectacularly. Social media and news outlets quickly saw through the attempt, and Vanessa's credibility crumbled under public scrutiny. Adrian, growing increasingly desperate, tried to negotiate privately. He offered financial compensation, begged for discretion, and attempted to sway Emily with promises of confidentiality and reconciliation. But Emily refused to be silenced. She would not allow money or manipulation to dictate the terms of her life. Protecting her self-respect and dignity became her only priority. The divorce proceedings, once initiated, quickly became public. Society, friends, and the media watched as the truth emerged: a millionaire husband had been caught cheating, not just with anyone, but with his wife's closest friend. The story spread, shocking the social circles that had long admired their so-called perfect marriage. Emily, however, remained calm and composed. She had made her choice, and in doing so, she reclaimed the narrative of her life. No scandal, no manipulation, no betrayal could diminish her strength or her resolve. Emily found herself walking through the door of her new apartment, a space that was entirely her own. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint, a quiet reminder that this was a blank slate, a chance to rebuild a life that had been fractured but not destroyed. She unpacked slowly, each item she placed on a shelf or unfolded from a box reinforcing a sense of control and ownership over her surroundings. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to breathe without the weight of betrayal pressing on her chest. She began returning to the hobbies she had abandoned during her marriage, painting again, attending yoga classes, and even joining a book club she had once loved. Work, too, became a source of empowerment rather than distraction. She poured energy into her career, tackling projects she had once set aside, and in doing so rediscovered a sense of purpose and accomplishment. Every small success, every step forward, reinforced the notion that her life could be fulfilling on her own terms. Emily made a conscious choice to block both Vanessa and Adrian from her digital and emotional world, cutting off the toxic ties that had threatened her peace. In their absence, new people entered her life, supportive colleagues who respected her, friends who encouraged her growth, and a compassionate therapist who guided her through processing the layers of grief, anger, and disappointment she had endured. Slowly, Emily felt lighter, the heaviness of betrayal lifting as she reclaimed her confidence. With each passing day, she began to understand that the pain she had endured had not broken her, it had freed her. Freed her from toxic relationships, from illusions of loyalty that never existed, and from the constraints of a life built on deceit. Emily emerged stronger, more self-aware, and unapologetically herself, ready to embrace a future she could define without compromise. Months later, Emily signed the final papers, the divorce complete. The weight of the past months, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the relentless emotional turmoil, was finally lifted. Adrian's public image, once polished and admired, crumbled under the scrutiny of the media and social circles. Sympathy for him was fleeting, the truth of his actions was undeniable, and people began to see him as the man who had shattered the trust of the woman who deserved so much better. Vanessa, too, vanished from Emily's life, erased from her social media, blocked from all contact, and rendered irrelevant by her own choices. With the finality of the divorce behind her, Emily took her first solo trip, a journey she had dreamed about but never dared to take while entangled in a world of lies and manipulation. She wandered through bustling streets, quiet beaches, and sunlit cafes, feeling for the first time in months the simple joy of being free. She noticed how light her steps felt, how unburdened her mind was, and how invigorating it was to exist in a world defined entirely by her own choices. Every experience, every small adventure, reminded her that she was capable of happiness and peace on her own terms. Emily reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the devastation she had faced, the shocking betrayals, and the months of solitude and self-discovery. She realized she hadn't simply walked away from betrayal, she had walked toward a life defined by truth, dignity, and self-respect. She had learned that strength is forged not by avoiding pain, but by facing it head-on and emerging unbroken. Standing at the edge of a sunlit horizon, she smiled, feeling a fierce clarity within herself. She understood that no one could take her power away, and she whispered to herself, a final affirmation of freedom and resilience. She had chosen herself, above everything else, and that choice would guide her forever.